Well, hello everyone and welcome to a new Care Species Guide. Now this Care Species Guide is very special to me. I didn't make it with that intention, but as I was studying and researching for this Care Species Guide, it actually took me down a rabbit hole of science that actually became quite special to me. First and foremost, I found out who or what is the small ants that I had and that I made a video about, that I said were probably Monomorium. I said that because of their body structure and because of how small they were, but actually it turns out they're probably Tetramorium. And this is what we're talking about today, Tetramorium Caspitun. Now I know that I've made that video and I said that those were probably Monomorium. I was wrong. And I've also made a video, an Care Species Guide on Tetramorium before. In that I talked about Tetramorium bicarnatum, which all the information there is right. The only thing I get wrong is that Tetramorium bicarnatum is not technically a species, it is a complex. You see, in Tetramorium, and I don't understand this fully well, but you don't have to understand it to take care of these species. Basically, they're complexes, right? And in those complexes are multiple species. In the genus Tetramorium, there are multiple areas or sort of groups that are defined and they are defined by region, right? So you've got a group of Indian Indian Tetramorium species. You've got a group of general Asia, a group of New World, which is South America. You've got a group of semi-Arctic Tetramoriums, which is actually where Tetramorium Caspitun is, because they are very temperate and they do have a range that goes well north in the northern hemisphere. So you have all of these groups, and in those groups you have complexes. When taking care of Tetramorium, you can usually use complexes as species because the species within the complexes will be very, very similar. So for example, my Care Species Guide on the species, or in this, or actually complex Tetramorium bicarnatum, will be applicable to almost all species in Tetramorium, in the complex Tetramorium bicarnatum. The thing is that since they are complexes with a lot of species, they do have a very wide range, usually. So what happens is you have species that are more of an area than another. So what will happen is, though they're very, very similar, they'll have a different preferences in when it comes to climate. However, when you have single species that have a very big range, let's say for example Lasius flavus or Lasius niger, that exists in Europe and goes all the way from the south of Europe near the Mediterranean Sea all the way north up to Sweden, right? Those have different communities of the same species which have different preferences in climate. So it's basically, you can treat it basically as the same as species when it comes to care, though in fact they aren't. And the big thing was that I thought that Tetramorium would be bigger, but actually most species in the complex Tetramorium Caespitum, which is what we're going to be talking about today, are quite small. So mine are probably one of the 3 species of Tetramorium that exist in Portugal, from what I have found, and all 3 of them belong to Tetramorium Caspitum, so they are almost certainly Tetramorium Caspitum. Which one of the 3 species they are is very hard to tell. They are all dark brown / black, and they're so small I can't figure out the little details about antenna segments and all that stuff. I just can't. I don't have any way of looking that closely to these so small ants. So now that that's out of the way, let's talk about Tetramorium Caspitun. Oh, by the way, I have one more thing to talk about, which is that there are some awesome names for Tetramorium groups. Tetramorium groups, no, but Tetramorium complexes. Like for example, there's one that's called Tetramorium Jedi, and another one that's called Tetramorium Smog, which tells me that scientists are more into pop culture than I thought. There's also one that's called Tetramorium Obesum, which is weird because ants can't be fat. But I guess. Especially Tetramorium, which is always very small. That's a little funny to me, and I enjoyed myself doing this research. So let's talk about Tetraworm Caspitun specifically, right? First of all, habitats. They inhabit a very wide range, as I've mentioned. These are complexes with a few species, so they do all have relatively wide ranges. Tetraworm Caspitun inhabits all of Europe, a little bit of northwest Africa, mainly and basically only Morocco, I think. They also inhabit the northwest of Asia, that being basically only Russia. They are also known to be invasive a little bit all throughout the world, and they also have, according to ant maps, which is usually a very reliable source, they have unidentified records all around the world, and as you can see in this map, the yellow ones are the unconfirmed ones, so maybe they exist there, but in the green ones you're certain that they exist there and that they are natural. The red ones you're certain that they exist there and that they are exotic. So when it comes to actual numbers, it's very hard to actually give you a ballpark because of how widely distributed they are. The thing that I recommend is that you use species that don't have any special temperature or humidity requirements from the same area as your Tetramorium Caespitum, because they will have probably the same types of requirements. They usually all like temperature humidities above 50. They can withstand a little bit lower, though as I've talked in the past, above 50 is always best because it's better for you and your ants. Most ants will not mind it one bit. Though Tetramorium Caspitum, from all the ones that I've researched about, they don't really like too high a humidity. So usually what I do is 50% humidity in the room, and the nest just slightly more humid, just adding water every now and then to keep it slightly above the humidity level of the outside. Now when it comes to temperatures, they do a lot better in warmer, and they are in warmer conditions, and they are known to be extremely active during the warmer times of the year, slowing down as it gets colder and stopping completely for hibernation. Usually all species of Tetramorium Caspitum seem to hibernate vaguely at the same time, so they start somewhere in October and they finish somewhere around March, right? So when it comes to temperatures, I would advise to have them in, if you need to have them in a permanent temperature, like in say in an ant room like I have, anywhere above 20, 21, 22 is good, but never go above 28, because that's a little much for most ant species of this area. So I'm assuming, and from my experience with the colony that I have, 26 is just right, just perfect, okay? My ant room fluctuates between 25 and 27, so it's most of the time at 26, and 26 seems to be just perfect. The ant colony that I have is thriving and growing like crazy. Now, mating flights of all these species happen between July and August, right? So there's these 2 months where they will fly. The thing is that these species are so closely related genetically, and I think that's why they are in complexes, that they can hybridize, right? A male from one species can have intercourse with a queen from another species, and the workers will be hybrids of the two, right? The offspring that this queen produces will either be non-existent or unfertile, right? But you will have hybrid ants, which is, I mean, hybrid ants, it's something like out of sci-fi. It's even weird to say. I wouldn't think that would happen given the way that they mate, but apparently it does. It doesn't make a lot of difference, though. It's just a colony that can't produce more colonies. It usually doesn't give them any advantage of any sort, but it's a cool concept, hybrid ants. So it's cool to know, I guess. By the way, when they hibernate, they usually do it between 5 degrees Celsius and 8 degrees Celsius. They do live in temperate places, and they do not build very deep nests, and as they're usually quite shallow, so they will be accepting of fluctuating temperatures. But if you want to give them the most sort of premium experience with hibernating, apparently from 5 to 8 degrees is the perfect way to go. I've never hibernated mine, though I do notice a decrease in in brood production when the colder times come around. And that is normal because of the bio clock of the ants. They think that they should be hibernating, they just aren't because they don't have the right conditions, and they just go on, and usually it's fine. Usually it doesn't make any difference, except I've talked about it. There's a link in the description for a video about that, and there's also a link in the description for a video about how you can have your ants thermo and hydro-regulate for you. So when you come to, for example, this complex of species, which is a little bit more tricky to find out what the perfect temperature is and the humidity, you can use those tips in that video to make sure that you get it right. Now let's talk about sizes. So there are different species with different sizes, but usually Tetramorium Caspitun workers are between 2 and 4 millimeters. Keep in mind that they are not polymorphic at all, so all the workers in the same colony will be the same size. It just depends on colony to colony, and most especially species to species, because this is again a complex of many species. The queens are usually, they also have different sizes, like the workers. Between species to species they are between 6 and 8 millimeters usually. I think there are a few exceptions, but it's very hard because some of these species are rare and there's not a lot of information, but 6 to 8 is a rough and very precise enough of a narrow down. They are claustral, so when you have a queen you don't have to feed it until it has the nanetics, the first generation of workers. And they are monogynous, though I have found a few sort of scientific accounts of polygyny in the wild where it was categorized as all the queens being egg-laying queens and fertile. Though I will say that I have not found any sort of people who've kept them accounts of being polygynous, so probably just always count them as monogynous, and that's what will happen. Anyway, it doesn't really matter because they get to up to 10,000 workers easily, and they don't seem to be affected by captivity. They do get to huge numbers in captivity as well. Usually species gets to only a percentage of what they can get in a while in captivity, but this species, I don't know if it's because they're so small, but usually all species in the Tetramorium Caspitun complex that are common to be kept, and usually they're just called Tetramorium Caspitun, they are able to get to the 10,000 and even beyond that if they're very well taken care of. Now, to take care of them properly, you need the climate conditions that I talked about, and also to feed them well. These ants, first of all, they can sting, but they won't sting you. They will, however, sting food, so it's very cool to see how they deal with food. And they are essentially, basically, carnivores at heart, right? They also eat some sweets, some sugar, some fruit, some honey, sugar water, but they are very carnivorous. So the main diet should be insects, basically, and other types of protein, because that's what they go for, and they go for that hard. I hopefully will sprinkle some footage of my colony in this video, and there will be some proper feeding videos in here as I speak, hopefully. Though I did change them into a new outworld, so they are not at their peak potential at the moment. Just keep in mind they are very, very cool to see swarm at prey item. Now let's talk a little bit about behavior. They are in behavior very similar to fire ants. So if you watch, for example, Ants Canada and his Solenopsis geminata colony, though these do not get to such massive numbers and are not such a force of nature, they have the same sort of, they build the same sort of nest. It's very similar, the construction of the nest, and they do have a similar body structure, though they do not have mages. They are very, very similar to Solenopsis invicta. Ants Canada has Solenopsis geminata, which do have workers. They also sting, but these ants are smaller than Solenopsis geminata or invicta, so their stingers don't really penetrate your skin. And trust me when I say, because I've been stung a lot. Just yesterday I've been stung multiple times. All that it does is give you a little itch for a few minutes, and then it passes and you never feel it again. Yesterday I was stung in my hands, my arms, my legs, and my feet, and everywhere it's all the same, right? It's always a little bit of an itch, and then it's gone. And honestly, you don't even feel the sting. You just feel the little itch after, but you do feel the bite. But it's nothing of importance. It doesn't make skin, it doesn't hurt, you just feel it. They're very, very small and very, very ineffective against humans, though they are very effective against other insects. They can easily take down a mealworm, even through the thick exoskeleton, and they will open it up and cut it open and just eat it all out. They are extremely precise and impressive at completely ripping the carcass of an insect of any edible bits. They really do go all out and eat everything. They scrape everything off. It's amazing. It's the only species that I have that when I go to take out the carcasses of mealworms, they crumble under the tongs that I use, because they just hollow them out completely. There's no meat left in there. It's impressive, really, super impressive. They are very small, so you must keep in mind that they can fit through spaces, so they might be a little bit of escape artists, if you know what I mean, but they are not great at climbing, so you don't have to worry about them crossing your barriers. They are very, very small, so barriers that are solid powder, like baby powder and stuff like that, do have a chance of them just walking past, because they're so light that they don't pry the baby powder off of the surface. However, if you use anything like Full-On, or if you use olive oil or Vaseline, they cannot at all cross any of those. They're terrible climbers, and they do not do great with liquid. They will drown with the liquids that you put in the outworld. So usually you want to feed them liquid foods through test tubes. You can put very small drops of honey, and believe me, one of those idiots will manage to drown no matter how small the honey drop is.
Don't worry, I took care of the honey. I'm taking care of the honey after this video. I thought they'd fill it with sand instead of drowning, but turns out I was wrong.
I mean, individually they're just dumb. I don't know what to tell you. Just dumb. So that's it. They're very interesting, and that's all you need to know to take care of them. So now let me just talk a little bit about the ant colony that I have. Last time you saw them, I gave them a nest upgrade, and if you remember, they had this outward that was made from a Ferrero Rocher box. Now I'm still basically in quarantine, so I still can't go out and get all the proper materials, but I did make an upgrade to the Sun Empire's setup with another box, which will be in an upcoming video, and I used the Ants Canada outro that I had on the Sun Empire to give to this small colony, right? And I filled it with dirt because I really am enjoying having my bigger colonies in natural setups. It makes cleaning a lot easier. I think it makes the colonies a lot happier to be able to dig and create their own nests, and to be able to feed at will, and just the fact that they can have a bioactive soil that they can dump all their garbage into, and that it will not be a problem. It just adds to how much soil they have. Is quite amazing. I think that the ants enjoy the fact that also with soil the humidity is more constant, and they can more properly manage themselves and make it so that they have the proper humidity by opening more holes, closing more holes, moving around their chambers and all that underground. The Sun Empire is doing extremely well, and they are a very big species. That usually means that you need a big space with soil for them to be able to actually build a proper nest, which I didn't provide. I provided a small and small enclosure, which they made do with. You can see that they have so many open chambers and open sort of hallways into their nest that it clearly tells you that they would like more space to build. So that's what I worked on with the bigger box that I'm still working on actually. But when it comes to this Tetraworm Caspitun colony, they actually don't need that much space, because first of all, because of the way on how they build, which is a little different from the Camponotes. So I'll go into detail about that when I do film the two of them building at the same time. That's actually a very cool concept for a video, how they build and the structure that they construct. The design is pretty fascinating actually to watch how different species, different sizes, and different ants build different ways to accommodate for their needs. So they do have this space which will be more than enough for them to live in for a while. They'll also keep the nests attached. Hopefully, just like the Sun Empire does, they'll always use the nests as sort of satellite nests, and we will be able to see brood and all of that happen in the nest. Hopefully have a few glimpses at the queen. I had a few with the Sun Empire because they are trusting in their nest and they keep there the mages, some pupae and larvae, usually not eggs, and at some points they do move eggs and the queen in, and most of the time the queen is hidden underground. Now, my colony of Tetramorium Caespitum, they really do rush around all the time in the nests because they are really affected by the vibrations of the metal on which they are sat, and in the dirt those vibrations are diminished. So I do think that they will move either completely inside, or at least I'll never be able to see the queen, even if I do see some satellite nest activity in the nests. Now, I'm not sure about any of this because they haven't moved in yet at the time that I'm recording this. Maybe in the footage it will be different, probably not, because as I've experimented in the past with this colony, they do take a long while to actually properly move into anything, so you know. So that is all about Tetramorium Caspitun. I hope you've liked this video as much as I've enjoyed making it, and if you want to support the channel, there's a Patreon link in the description, and also I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.